This is episode 675 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Well, Wally, no shortage of things to talk about. Obviously, we are entering the 60-day session just a few hours from now, as well as, of course, the Trump inaugural yesterday and other issues, of course, going on within the last week. But wanted to get your thoughts on the inauguration as a whole and just kind of were you able to tune in or were you busy with other projects?
Yeah, I was working on other projects, Paul, but I did watch a few videos of it, and it's just a fascinating piece of visual political theater. It's one of those. It's obviously the swearing in of a president is a very important step in each time that happens in the United States. But, the people that are there and who's looking at who and who's frowning and who's smiling and how they comport themselves. And then to have the Supreme Court Chief Justice start a little early before the Bible's brought in, just a little bit. Obviously they don't do this every day, but there are little glitches. But the point is, Donald Trump is now president, so it was successful.
Yeah, that is the big thing. And we have a ceremony that was moved inside due to the cold weather. I don't know if I'd mentioned it on the air, but when I was back east, I was in Washington and never really taken a tour before because they'd opened the Capitol Visitor Center after I moved out of Washington and was able to take a tour of the rotunda and all the various things there, Statuary Hall, etc. So I had an even better kind of understanding of where things were. I personally, I think it was very nice and beautiful setting to be held there. Obviously, a more limited number of people could actually be a part of it. But, I get the arguments and I get the reasoning for it. And there were some really powerful moments. I think Carrie Underwood's rendition of America the Beautiful, a cappella, as it turned out, because of a not functioning musical track. There was a African-American gentleman who did a part of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Of course, yesterday was Martin Luther King Day as well, so there was a lot of pomp and circumstance and various things. But I think when it comes to what we like to talk about, which is, of course, policies, Trump immediately came back into the Capitol building after the ceremony and started signing away on some executive orders. And it's worth talking about a few of these executive orders. I'm looking at an article from Time Magazine, and I don't know if there's a comprehensive list, but this list is pretty good. So, first and foremost, Trump issued an executive order rescinding previous executive orders. So, primarily dealing with DEI policies and on climate change from the last administration. Restoring freedom of speech and ending federal censorship that the Biden administration had undertaken, weaponization of the government that directs the Attorney General to identify and take action to correct politically motivated law enforcement activity from the DOJ, SEC, and Federal Trade Commission, ending remote work for federal agencies. So federal bureaucrats are about to get to know their office mates again. Regulatory freeze, stopping federal hiring. Let's see, the Paris Climate Agreement, pardoning January 6th protesters, delaying the TikTok ban by 90 days, pending some kind of agreement with them, withdrawing from the World Health Organization. Let's see, security clearances for some of the federal so-called security officials who uh, basically called the Hunter Biden laptop Russian disinformation, national emergency at the border. Uh, so yeah, troop deployment at the border. Oh, unleashing American energy. This one directs an immediate review of agency activities that burden the development of domestic energy resources, such as natural gas, coal, hydrogen, biofuels, uh, critical minerals, and nuclear energy resources. And he tries to go after birthright citizenship. That's in the Constitution. I don't think that one will stick. Um, so yeah, I'm just skimming the. We've got policy for days here, but yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of good stuff that we support and that we want to see happen. Pausing certain wind energy projects. So yeah, it's a very comprehensive list, and that's day one of the Trump administration.
Yeah, and Paul, unlike his first term, where he actually learned how difficult it was to get things in place, Trump and his people had done a lot of work ahead of time, so they were really ready to go. Now, the Senate is going to slow roll his cabinet picks, so that will slow down certain things. But yeah, in terms of his new executive orders and undoing the old ones, that's probably about as much change as you would ever see in United States governance on one day.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So very much a change of direction. So uh, it was a unique day for a lot of reasons, and some very powerful moments. But yeah, we're talking policy here, and of course, it's worth noting that on the way out the door, Biden issued some more pardons for his family, for Anthony Fauci, which really hacks off, so to speak, a lot of folks like myself who have seen the Fauci. There a lot of stuff on social media about, well, you know, issuing a pardon implies that you are charged with something or that you may have done something wrong. Fauci, the claim was always that he had never done anything wrong. So why would you need a pardon? Mark Milley, Joint Chief of Staff, yeah, some pardons out the door by Biden, and of course, I think the most shocking thing of all, we haven't even got to, is suddenly on social media, not just his personal account, but the White House account, Biden was touting the Equal Rights Amendment as having suddenly become the law of the land. And you just wonder what the heck is he talking about, because his archivist and other policymakers, I think the Attorney General had already said, no, this Equal Rights Amendment is not the law of the land. This is something that was around in the 70s, where uh, I think it was good that it was ultimately failed, because it's basically trying to take equal treatment under the law and make that equal outcomes under the law, which are two very, very different things. But and this, of course, is relating to women and women's rights. But Biden was down to the last second in office, trying to kind of monkey with the system, so to speak. And I'll just add that while there were a few monuments designated, I don't believe I've seen anything relating to the Membre's Peak monument that we had Lori Coleman on back, I don't know, it was probably in the spring of last year, down near Deming, southern New Mexico, where they were uh, there was an effort to put hundreds of thousands, I believe somewhere on the order of 300,000 acres of land around the Deming area off limits. And I know Lori and I were trading emails back and forth up until the very last minutes of the Biden uh, administration, and we were like, is it happening? Is it going to be done? What's the latest? And did not see anything. So that is, as I understand it, not going to happen, at least in this Biden administration.
Well, and Paul, one of the questions I've had since after about the first year is who is Biden and who is the Biden administration? So, this is the first president in my memory that if the president said something, you knew it was the president. It was his idea. He understood it. It was a thought through, purposeful thing. But I'm not so sure that's the case. We talked about the LNG export ban that went out, and there was an article in the Free Press where there's a pretty extensive interview of Mike Johnson, and Mike said that he went in to meet with the president, and Biden wasn't even aware that that had happened, and so as these things come down at the last minute, I'm pretty sure he was working on the pardons of his family. That I think that's clear. In the last his last scene as Junior Soprano, he had to take care of that. But a lot of these things you just don't know how much of those are Biden or how much of those are his advisors, and then how does this happen? So it's I breathe easier. The world is a dangerous place. There's a lot going on in the Middle East. China could invade Taiwan. There's just things that happen, and to have somebody, I think that not only has the judgment but the capability of making these tough decisions as things come up. I feel a lot better about that. But yes. On the Equal Rights Amendment, I saw that, Paul, and I was there the first time in the '70s in high school when that was being talked about, and I think maybe he was getting not quite enough oxygen and a little bit too much alcohol is all I could think of when I saw that. It's like, why that? Why now?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think we know one thing, which is that Joe Biden was not the tweeter in chief. He was not the one putting out a lot of these statements and social media, for better or for worse. And I think there are both sides to that equation. Of course, Donald Trump in his first 4 years was very much on the Twitter and really putting out some things and causing headaches for his staffers. But I heard that Mike Johnson clip, the Speaker of the House, and he said that he went and talked to Biden, and that Biden said it was just a study on LNG, and Mike Johnson was like, "No, this is not just a study. This is actually a ban pending that study," and Biden had no idea. So, yeah, I do think there was, oftentimes, maybe not often, maybe it was always. That the staffers of the Biden administration were the ones really calling the shots. And I think that changed the priorities of the Biden administration. Biden 4 years ago on his inauguration day, and I watched most of that, he was very much trying to tout it as a return to normalcy, a return to decency, kind of back to normal. Well, uh, Biden was not normal and was not really decent in a lot of his statements and rhetoric about Republicans, Trump supporters. What do you call them? The hardcore MAGA, blah blah blah. He always went on with that kind of rhetoric. Uh, I I will briefly read some of the things that I wrote about Biden's policies on the way out the door. And I think it's tough to really rank presidents. My worst of all time has consistently been Woodrow Wilson. I don't think Biden is quite at that level where he helped create the personal income tax, helped create the Soviet Union through his World War II and or not World War II, World War One intervention and policies there. But here are 11 policies that I write are really some of the baddies that Biden pushed. Botched Afghanistan withdrawal. Whether you think we should have left or not, the withdrawal was conceived and not well carried out. His anti-energy policies on his first day in office, canceling Keystone XL, and then the aforementioned LNG export limits, 625 million acres of outer continental shelf off limits, while production was able to grow and increase, no thanks to him, but thanks to innovations in the industry. Biden was arguably the most anti-energy president we've ever had. The border policy, and RGF is on record as supporting immigration, including more legal immigration, but just having the border left wide open was not the correct approach. Inflation, it's easy to say, well, yeah, the spending problems have been around for a long time, and they have been, but it wasn't an inflation problem until Biden took office. And you can blame COVID, but he didn't address any of those issues while he had the chance. He could have expanded energy production. He could have done some things to make prices come down, and he didn't. He passed the obviously not related to Inflation Reduction Act. Rule of law, Biden single-handedly attempted to force millions of Americans to receive the experimental COVID vaccine. That was rejected by the Supreme Court. He repeatedly forced taxpayers to pay off student loans that were willfully taken out by people who took them. Of course, there was the Equal Rights Amendment on the way out the door and a few others. Free speech, also, of course, famously during COVID and on social media, Biden tried to push back against free speech, his failed COVID policies, overspending, overly aggressive enforcement of antitrust, Spirit Airlines, the Albertsons Kroger deal, and Nippon Steel. Even though Trump does agree with that Nippon Steel one, Biden was really aggressive in enforcing antitrust and preventing businesses from experiencing efficiencies. Overregulation. His new regulations total $1.4 trillion in cost to the economy. And then, of course, the abuse of presidential pardons. Now, there are plenty of other areas to discuss, but the fact that we came up with 11 pretty easily highlights why we think that, or I'll speak for myself. I would say that in the 20th century, outside of Woodrow Wilson, Joe Biden is the worst president we've ever had, with honorable mention given not to Jimmy Carter, but in my opinion, to George W. Bush and Richard Nixon. So it's not a partisan thing, but Woodrow Wilson takes the cake in American history, in my opinion.
Well, and Paul, I read your list when you sent it out to me, and it got me to thinking about the parallels between the Woodrow Wilson administration and the Biden administration. Woodrow Wilson, he served for 8 years, but he had a stroke about a couple years before the end of his administration, and everything. Again, this was not to compare to Biden, but I've never read anything that indicated that Woodrow Wilson had anything to do with making a cogent decision his last 2 years in office. It was his wife. And, we saw some inklings of that where at times you wondered if Joe Biden was president. So, I do think that Joe and Woodrow Wilson will go down. But the reason is that like Wilson, Biden, he did a lot of policies that were very popular with a small group of political elites that, on balance, were either just didn't work or were not based on underlying facts or were going to be detrimental and promised to be beneficial. And believe me, the history of government is full of that. But yes, I used to think Carter was the worst, and then I started to look not into Nixon's things that he did Paul, related to Watergate, take that away, just some of the policies Nixon put in.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that Carter definitely had over Biden was you never would catch Jimmy Carter being unpresidential. You know, the most unpresidential thing he did was said he had unpure thoughts once when he looked at a Playboy magazine. So if that's the worst thing you ever did, that pales compared to potentially leveraging your office through your family to get, family payments. So yes, I think that not. And then one final comparison, and I really have thought this very early on, and then the internet caught up with me a little bit, is the similarities between Joe Biden and Junior Soprano in The Sopranos. And Junior Soprano was always a crook, but he was finally found out a little bit late, and then he ended up almost killing Tony because he was mentally out of his mind. Well, at some level, boy, the wokeism was riding high, but it's almost like Joe Biden killed the Democratic Party. He did such a bad job and was exposed in so many areas that are so counter to what the people were thinking, that he had enough power, he had enough time, and he didn't have any discretion to do a bunch of things that just hurt the Democratic Party from a place of riding high with the mainstream media to now being in a shambles.
Yeah, no doubt about all of that. And yeah, I think the pardons are in particular going to hurt his legacy with Democrats. I think a lot of Democrats like his broad, policy approach, which really, just highlights, I think, the huge gulf between the two political parties, and even where the Democrats were even Obama was much more sympathetic to American energy as a general rule, let alone Bill Clinton, who, of course, was president not entirely that long ago, both of whom were, at least as governing entities, much more moderate in their approaches. So, yeah, we'll see what Biden's legacy is, and if we ever have a slow day, we can really go through with a fine-tooth comb some of the presidents and their rankings. But definitely Biden towards the bottom of American presidents for sure. Now we're moving to New Mexico, and the LFC came out with their budget. I wasn't expecting great things, so it's easy to not be disappointed when you're ready for mediocrity already. And we were not disappointed. So the LFC came out with its budget, $10.8 billion, a little bit more money for roads and transportation than the governor's budget has in it. So that's welcome. Ultimately, the way this whole thing works is that we have two different visions, the governor's and the LFC's, and once the legislature gets into the nitty-gritty when it comes to spending policies as well as tax policies, such as they are, we'll see what the situation looks like and what vision wins out, or if they kind of just mold the two together. You're not going to have your life substantively impacted one way or another by the differences in those particular budgets. Although, again, the LFC's approach to roads may help somewhat on the margins there. But I wrote a more thorough piece because the real question for us is not where does the money go? It's what tax relief or non-tax relief do we see in Santa Fe? And the answer is no tax relief whatsoever. But of course, we make the case, as does freshman representative Republican from Hobbs, Elaine Sena Cortez, who wrote an article in the Albuquerque Journal and is sponsoring a bill to eliminate the state's personal income tax. Not only is this not being done in the legislative budget, but it's not at all included in there, no tax relief whatsoever, taking our top rate from 5.9% to zero, $2.1 billion in revenue expected from the personal income tax in fiscal year 2026. But we can do it. We could do it with money left over. The state is expected, thanks largely to the oil and gas industry, to bring in $13.4 billion to the general fund. The industry itself brings in way more than that, but it's diverted to the permanent funds, the sovereign wealth funds. But $13.4 billion, you subtract the governor's $10.94 billion, you still get, you eliminate the personal income tax for 2.1, and then you have almost $400 million left over to spend for whatever you want, or save it, do whatever. And it's not going to happen. It's unfortunate because New Mexico is in a prime position to do something big on taxes. Mississippi's House of Representatives, of course, impoverished state, but a Republican-controlled state now, was Democrat for a very, very long time. That state has voted to eliminate its personal income tax, and they don't even have oil and gas to the same extent in Mississippi. But we'll see if another Mississippi miracle is in the making. But we're not doing any big things here in New Mexico on taxes, even though we could comfortably do so.
Yeah, Paul, and we have such a huge void of, I don't know, intellectual capacity to even, in the words of Martin Luther King, to look to the future, to dream about what could be, or, to quote the words of our vice president, be unburdened by our past. And, what happens is New Mexico has been a very poor state for a long, long time, had poor results in lots of areas that are important to its citizens. But now we have money, but we don't have money in the pockets of our citizens. We have money in the hands of the government. And instead of using it for things that address the issues that the people care about, which is crime, education, healthcare shortage, roads, to build a better economy. They take care of the government. They just incrementally grow the same bureaucracy with the same policies that got us to the place we are when we didn't have all this oil and gas money. So will something change? I don't know. There could be a big swing. But the last people it seems like the legislature is thinking about is the taxpayers in New Mexico, and by extension, the business people of New Mexico who actually could do the things they want to do, which is diversify the economy, create jobs, and put the state on a better track for the future.
Yeah. So that is one thing we don't expect this session. We've talked a lot about some of the things that we do expect, and we'll continue to talk about those. But one notable area is the medical provider shortage. That is something where it's pretty stark, the difference between what people who are experts in the field say and know versus what the policymakers in charge want to do. So this all came to me because there were two stories that ran this past week on the very same day. One was a KOB TV story about women's specialists, a practice involving, OBGYN and delivering babies, and et cetera, that said they will no longer deliver babies at Presbyterian Hospital. This firm does Loveless Women's and other firms, I believe, not just right here in Albuquerque, but probably in the metro area. Anyway, they said, we're not doing this. And the quotes were enlightening. The person quoted was Dr. Jean Valdez of Women's Specialists. He said, we can no longer stretch our physicians to cover two hospitals. We have to take both the physical and mental well-being of our physicians in mind and can't stretch them out too far. And then she said that they have 9 physicians providing 24-hour OB coverage. They need that to double, but our state faces a crippling shortage of doctors and other medical providers. Valdez went on to cite New Mexico's medical malpractice laws, tax policy, and Medicaid reimbursement rates as reasons. Now, we've talked about the GRT on doctors, but make no bones about it, eliminating the personal income tax would be very attractive for doctors because, of course, they are high earners, and bringing some of them to New Mexico, bringing more of them to New Mexico through many policies, but one of them being income tax elimination, that would definitely be effective. So then I looked at the Albuquerque Journal and saw House Democrats announcing that they had their plan for addressing the medical provider shortage. And they actually, interestingly enough, the House Democrats were kind of, the article says that they were combating the message of the Republican plans, and that the true healthcare issues, according to the Democrats, are from corporate greed. So, what are their big plans for healthcare? And I know you're going to be shocked and amazed by this, Wally, but not at all what the doctors who are discussing the issue are talking about. Here are what the Democrats plan, which is housing subsidies and mandates to keep certain nursing ratios. So just to review, the doctors concerned about the medical provider shortage say that our med-mal laws, tax policies, and Medicaid reimbursement are reasons for the shortage. The Democrats, led by Representative Eleanor Chavez, say that they want to offer housing subsidies and mandate nursing ratios. A little bit of a disconnect there, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. So, this doctor issue, Searchlight New Mexico, which is no conservative organization, is much more along the line of the Rio Grande Foundation in terms of underlying causes. And, they don't get quite as much into the Medicaid, but they mention it, and they certainly are all over the malpractice situation in New Mexico. And Paul, I have a proposal.
Ooh.
Nobody wants to see our poor, downtrodden trial attorneys lose income by having.
Speak for yourself there, Wally.
But I'm being facetious here, but I'm trying to channel Sally Struthers and her pet pitches on late night TV. But Paul, we could give a $250,000 transition bonus to every trial attorney in New Mexico and be better off with good malpractice than we are now. And so it's one of those things. The reason I call them the poor downtrodden trial attorneys is that's what we act like. And I do think that in the legislative caucus, I have a feeling that even the social progressives there are afraid of the trial attorneys in that caucus because they certainly don't bring it up. And until there's a break in that kind of coalition of different Democratic factions, we're going to continue to have problems. And I have a feeling this will, I said many times on the podcast, I hope it doesn't get to this, that, we will turn away from running our vehicle into the brick wall at 100 miles an hour. I have a feeling it's going to take a true, immediate, profound crisis in healthcare to get them to make a change, as this might have to be something in a special session once it's clear that the last new doctor has left the state.
Yeah, well, I put my own little list together, and I realized that the good doctor, Valdez, was not necessarily putting out a policy argument, a comprehensive argument. She was talking specifically about New Mexico as well. And of course, our medical provider shortage is not limited to New Mexico. It's a nationwide issue, but I had a few thoughts of my own. The third-party payment system by itself, what I call the original sin of American health policy, which happened in World War II or at the time of World War II, where the insurance companies and the employers were brought into the mix in a much more robust way, unfortunately. Then you've got the Great Society Medicare and Medicaid programs, and one could certainly argue that subsidizing health care for the elderly and the poor is a good idea, but those programs are just fundamentally broken and flawed, and they're unaffordable as well. Obamacare, which reinforced the worst aspects of our healthcare system, especially the third-party payer system. Occupational licensure, that's a state level. Medical malpractice, our poor economy, see tax reform and tax structure, poor schools, and high crime. And of course, there's the reality of New Mexico's rural nature as well. So,
yeah, put bad roads. You couldn't drive here easily if you wanted to. So,
yeah. So there's plenty of causes, and the state can do some things, but it's not inclined in its current approach to do those things to address our medical provider shortage.
and
Go
Paul, real
ahead.
quick, you said
Yep.
one thing that's very important is this medical provider issue is not unique to New Mexico. But when it's a huge national issue and we are doing horribly relative to how healthcare providers view the situation, it makes it even worse. If it was one of those where, no, doctors are easy to come by, we can get a few to come here, as many as we need, even if we're not doing a good job. That's not the situation on a nationwide basis.
Yeah. I will conclude with the following, which is that there's been a lot of talk out there about the show Landman. I don't know if we've discussed it in detail here, but I did take the time to post over at Heirs of Enchantment a little 3-minute speech about the importance of the oil and gas industry. The title is TV show Landman provides some oil and gas truth bombs for viewers. It's a very brief talk that the character played by Billy Bob Thornton, who is the titular head of the show, the Landman, although he plays a role that really transcends any single role. It's more like a fixer, but it's a entertaining, excellent show, and got a little education to it aside from the fun and excitement that you get from the show. We cannot play it here because we believe in being a maybe not G-rated, but we'll go with PG-rated.
PG, family friendly.
So if you log on and check out this little 3-minute talk about the importance of the oil and gas industry and the relative lack of importance of so-called renewables, like specifically wind turbines, you just be prepared, sensitive ears.
Yeah, if you don't know what bowling and golf words are, they use both of those in there. So it's the George Carlin of the word. What is it? The 7 words you can't see on television. Billy Bob Thornton's character uses at least 2 or 3 of them.
Yep. So we'll let you check that out for yourself. I did share this with Bob Clark when I was on KKOB last Friday, and he immediately had his producer going to do the bleeps. And so I don't know if Bob's got a bleeped audio version of it that he's played yet, but he was very interested. I showed him this between segments. So it's definitely worth checking out. And the show is, like I said, it's entertaining. It's not certainly all a love letter to the oil and gas industry. There's a lot of somewhat unrealistic things about for example, there is a blowout very early on in the show where 2 individuals die. I'm not, hopefully shattering anything here, but I've now lived in New Mexico for the better part of 18 years and have never even heard of a blowout in the oil patch down in southeast New Mexico, let alone one that killed anybody. So,
well, what was it? Red Adair was the blowout guy back in the day. That's before they put all of this blowout prevention equipment on. So, yeah, blowout. Okay, blowouts are something that the 1950s oil industry would be well aware of, but
Yeah, it's
the
basically
modern
when the pump or whatever
where when you're
malfunctions.
or where you're drilling and you hit a high pressure zone that
Oh,
you weren't expecting is one of the places it happens. It almost never. I mean, I've never heard it happening, even in the Jed Clampett era of oil and gas production for producing well. But yeah, so it's one of those. There's other things. Don't get me wrong. You know, there's safety is an important issue in the
absolutely.
oil and gas industry because it's a dangerous thing. You're moving big pieces of equipment and drilling holes a mile down and a mile sideways underground. You know, things can go wrong, but
Yeah,
blowouts tend to not be one of them.
that's something else about the show is that I had to we did a look. You know, we do this a lot of times when we're watching various
Mhm.
TV shows. You know, is this historical fact really correct when we're watching
Yeah.
something like Manhunt about the Lincoln assassination,
Yes.
subsequent manhunt, or Ben Franklin, or other shows? And this one, we wanted to see, you know, are these people working on what it's a frack pad,
Yeah.
and you see these people, and you're like, no, they trained actors on to do that, and they have the real equipment sitting there, and
Yeah.
very impressive to see how realistically they approach the industry. And you know, again, the only time I could ever, you know, Jed Clampett is about as much oil and gas as you get in American pop culture. Dallas, the other one.
Oh yeah, and Dallas was never about. You never went to the field.
Yeah, I
you
never
might have
saw
gone to the bedroom or the courtroom, but never the production field.
So just to have this industry portrayed in anything resembling a realistic nature is fascinating, especially when you consider how good of a job they do with so many aspects of it. Of course, understanding that it still is a fictional show, the primary approach is to entertain. Keeping that in mind, and if you are inclined, enjoy. So. And if you are, send us a note. Let us know. info@riograndefoundation.org is an email that will get to me, and we can chat about how you found the show, especially if you're in the industry itself and you have all the info. I'm an outsider, but relatively knowledgeable based on who some of our friends and supporters are at the Rio Grande Foundation. A lot of folks in the oil and gas industry, and got to learn quite a bit about that industry over the years. So again, check it out. But thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.